Hello, friends, and welcome back to Dare Me to Prosper. My name is Avery. I am your host, and this is episode 16, where we're talking about people-pleasing, the cost of being nice, and how boundaries build confidence and self-worth, and how people-pleasing is slowly killing you. So welcome. If you are a people pleaser or you're close to a people pleaser, I hope this episode is helpful for you because I am about to convince you that people pleasing, gosh, this is going to be a lot of alliteration. People pleasing is really just not good for you. And it's toxic. It's toxic. And we have been cultured. Our society has conditioned people to be people pleasers and to bend over backwards for people. And in reality, that is harming us. It's harming the people that we're fake pleasing. And it's just not a good habit to have. So we're going to kind of talk about how to rewire your perspective and shift into not being a people pleaser and holding your boundaries and still being able to be a kind person. So I promise you don't have to be a mean person to not be a people pleaser, because I know that's a common misconception. But learning how to confidently say no will change how you feel about yourself and how others respond to you. And we're going to talk about it. Okay. So just to get all on the same page about what a people pleaser is, a people pleaser is someone who constantly prioritizes someone else's needs, wants, and comfort over their own, usually out of fear of conflict, fear of rejection, fear of being disliked. But it's not just being kind, it's truly self-abandonment disguised as kindness. So very toxic. And people pleasers are taught that this is just being nice. Oh, I'm just being nice, and that's going to make people like me. But in reality, you're not necessarily, people may view you as nice, yes, but it often causes people to also kind of overlook you or take advantage of you because they're like, oh, so-and-so, yeah, they always say yes. Being a people pleaser kind of lowers your boundaries, right? It breaks down your walls. And it allows you to become weakened in a sense and allows other people to take advantage of you, even if that's not their goal. You know, they might be taking advantage of you subconsciously, but regardless, it puts you in a very vulnerable position. And so being a people pleaser, and I do not say this to put you down or shame you in any way if you consider yourself a people pleaser, I'm saying this as just a means of hopefully you being able to kind of reflect on it and kind of see if it resonates with you. And if it does, you know, taking this as an opportunity to build up some boundaries and build up some confidence. That being said, people pleasing is really indicative of having low self-confidence. Like if you were a people pleaser, that's that fear. Your fear of how other people are going to respond is overriding what matters most to you. That's low self-confidence. That's low self-worth. And so you're practicing this habit of over-giving yourself to others, which is leaving you stretched too thin, leaves you overthinking, you're worried about what other people are thinking. Again, it's that very vulnerable, toxic relationship for you and for whoever you are pleasing. Now, I'm kind of coming at this episode from a unique perspective because I am not a people pleaser. I am not a people pleaser by any means. I've never been a people pleaser. I don't know if it's the eldest daughter in me or what happened in my childhood for me to feel like I needed those boundaries, but I've always had pretty good boundaries. That being said, I am married to a people pleaser. I have close friends that are people pleasers. I'm very familiar of the patterns of a people pleaser. And so I've had these conversations a lot, and it's really caused me to kind of observe these patterns and these habits of people who really feel like they need to bend over backwards for other people, when in reality, it's making them miserable. And so I'm kind of coming at this from a pattern recognition perspective. I also think there's kind of a spectrum, like a lot of things. Like you could be somebody who is just a chronic, really severe people pleaser where it just, you cannot stand the idea of disappointing someone, or you could be kind of less intense on the spectrum, and maybe you tend to people please sometimes, but then you have a limit where you really put your foot down if it goes too far. You know what I mean? So it's not necessarily an all or nothing. You might people please a little bit, or you might people please a lot. But it's just, again, Awareness is the key here, recognizing when you are prioritizing someone else's needs above your own in a way that is detrimental to yourself, which ultimately is also detrimental to the other person. Because there's a big difference in giving or helping someone else and kind of coming at it from a very willing place, like, yeah, this is difficult for me, but it really means a lot to me to help this person or to do this thing. And so I'm going to do it anyway, even though it might not be my favorite thing to do, or even though it puts me out a little bit. There's a difference between that and this situation where you are giving to someone else, even though you really don't want to. You really want to say no, but you're saying yes. You really felt stuck and you agreed to do something or give something or do whatever it is because you just felt like you didn't have an option, even though it's difficult for you, or you don't have the time, you don't have the bandwidth, you don't have the emotional capacity to give or to do whatever it is, and you say yes anyways. So there's a nuance there between maybe doing something that's important to you, but it's not your favorite thing, and doing something that is truly out of obligation, even though you really don't want to. Does that make sense? So people often become people pleasers from habits or situations that happen in their childhood. It's often rooted in childhood experiences where love or approval felt conditional, or if saying no or expressing your needs led to punishment or disapproval. So maybe a parent who kind of treated you in a way where you felt like you weren't really receiving their love unless you did what they wanted you to do. This is also very common if you have a narcissistic parent. These often go hand in hand. Or if you expressing a need as a child led to a very negative outcome or a punishment, or you just felt like you were never allowed to be upset, you were never allowed to have a need. This causes children and eventually adults to suppress their own needs in order to kind of keep the peace or to stay safe. So again, we've talked about this in other episodes, but this is, again, it's very, very common, which is why people pleasing is also very common, because you can be in this situation as a child and it might manifest differently for different people. So I'm not saying that if this happened to you as a child, you'll absolutely grow up to be a people pleaser, but this is kind of one way that that situation manifests depending on what your response was as a child. If you learned in your early childhood that conflict was unsafe, like you're not allowed to have a need, you're not allowed to express that something is wrong, you're constantly responsible for your parents' emotions or somebody close to you, their emotions. One of those common responses as a child is to basically feel like it's your job to smooth things over. It's your job to keep the peace. So as a kid, you just do whatever you can to be like, okay, all right, I won't bother you. Okay, I won't express this need. Okay, whatever you need. Because as a child, you just felt like, well, I just want to keep the peace, or I just want love from my parent. So I'm going to do whatever I need to do to get that or to have it feel peaceful, which is absolutely not your responsibility as a child. But unfortunately, there's just so many emotionally immature parents out there that raise children in this environment. It's very sad, but here we are. So another way that this manifests is basically the child, and then eventually grown up, seeking validation. So basically, your parent is causing you to feel unloved, or like you have to do certain things to feel loved, or act a certain way, or keep the peace. You are so worried about someone else's happiness that you never learned to value your own emotions, your own feelings, what you were feeling and dealing with those, because basically all of your emotional attention went outward to your parent or to whoever. So you learned to value what they needed and wanted and not what you needed and wanted. So you started outsourcing your worth. Instead of looking inward for your own sense of self and self-worth and kind of building that confidence around who you are and what you wanted and what you needed, you outsourced that to a parent, and you're thinking about what they wanted or what they needed. Or maybe this wasn't even your necessarily childhood, but maybe your parent acted this way, and so you learned to act this way because your parent did that. Like maybe your mom acted this way towards your dad, and so you kind of imitated her. Again, it's very common to have the parent who basically makes the children responsible for their emotions. All that to say, there's other ways to become a people pleaser, but this is a very common scenario where that happened in your childhood, and now as an adult, you feel like it was and now is your job to keep other people happy. It started with your parents, and now it's just anybody around you. You confuse empathy with obligation because you always felt obligated for somebody else's emotions. And now that has followed you into adulthood, and you are doing this without even recognizing that you're doing it. You're just like, I have to keep so-and-so happy. I have to keep people happy. I can't have you disappointed in me, because the little kid in you is going, if I disappoint this person, I'm going to feel unloved, even though maybe this person doesn't even matter. It's not even a close family member or a friend. You're just so, it's a habit. It's an ingrained subconscious habit where you feel panicked because the little kid in you is panicking over not feeling loved if you disappoint someone. So at the root of being a people pleaser is this fear. Again, this fear of not being liked, of losing a connection with somebody that's important to you, a fear of feeling like you're not enough unless you're constantly bending to fit what other people want. You have this subconscious, your body, inner child remembers what that was like and has kind of convinced your nervous system that this is the way that it is. And in order to get out of that, you're gonna have to get a little bit uncomfortable. You're going to have to convince your mind and your body that this is not the way we're supposed to do things, that we don't need to feel unsafe or unloved if somebody else isn't getting their way, if it's to our detriment to give somebody else what they're asking for. So it's going to be uncomfortable when you start to kind of undo these habits and undo these things. It's not going to feel right? Because you've spent your whole life doing it this one way and keeping other people happy. Meanwhile, you're the one suffering. It's going to feel uncomfortable when you, especially if you've trained other people that you're the person that always says yes, or you're the person that always, you're so nice. You just always give other people whatever they want. If that is the world that you have built around yourself, it might surprise people a little bit when you stop acting that way or when you start setting up boundaries. And that's okay. Not only is it okay, it's vital and it's important, because other people, they might view you as, oh, you're so nice. You always do what other people want. You can absolutely still be a nice person without bending over backwards and just flattening your own boundaries. But you're going to have to teach the people around you, if you've convinced them through action that you don't have boundaries, teaching them now that you do have boundaries is going to be a little bit of a learning curve. But it's a very important, very valid learning curve, because you need to recognize that it's okay to take care of yourself. It's okay to take care of your own emotions. Not only that, but taking care of your own emotions and taking care of your emotional needs is healthier and better for the people around you. And I know that's really hard sometimes because we've been cultured, especially if you were raised in a Christian setting or if that's kind of your background. I really feel like there's a disconnect there between, like, it's almost like you're taught that caring about yourself in any way, shape, or form is selfish. And that is so wrong. That is so wrong. And it breeds a toxic environment. It breeds toxic relationships. It breeds people being able to use or take advantage of other people, especially women, because we're so wired to serve others, because we are nurturing and we are caring. So it's in our nature to overgive, right? Especially if you're a mom, we're always overgiving to others. But you overgive so much and you flatten your boundaries so much that you end up in a place of being completely depleted, possibly being resentful towards other people. And it's not a healthy place to be. You cannot pour from an empty cup, right? You are emptying your cup every single time you overgive and you overcompensate for someone else. Now, being a mom is a hard example, right? Because in that sense, we often do have to overgive of ourselves just because we don't have these villages, right? We don't have a society that's set up for motherhood where we get to really share the load very well. Even if you have a really, incredibly helpful husband who absolutely, shares the role of parenthood, it's still very difficult and it still is very over giving. So that is kind of an anomaly in this situation. So I'm not necessarily talking about your kids, although especially as your kids grow older, this can absolutely be a place where you people please, because even your kids, like everybody else, are going to get used to maybe asking you for too much or asking you to do things that they can do themselves. And it's okay. In fact, I would say it's important to teach your kids to be independent and to have your kids, do things for themselves. If they can do something for themselves, then they should at least know how to do that, or maybe have that be the norm. Otherwise, you're going to be in this chronic position of always being expected to drop your own needs and give other people what they need. But the bulk of this episode is not necessarily about motherhood. It's specifically about other people and your relationships with other people. Because what you don't want is you don't want resentment between you and these people that you're people pleasing for, right? Because that's what happens. You resent having to do the thing, or the person who asked you, you start to resent them, but you also feel worried. You're like, did I do enough? Do they think I'm selfish? How do they feel about me? Do they think I'm a good person? Are they happy that I did this for them? Do they think I'm a bad person? All the while wishing that you had the courage to say no because you really didn't want to do the thing. But you're too worried, you're too consumed with their response because, again, it's that childhood trigger telling you you don't have love or you don't have their respect or that their emotions are somehow elevated so much more than yours are. And all of this was a survival technique, a coping mechanism, a trauma response. Because as a child, you did need those parents or those caretakers to survive, literally survive. So your brain, in all of its intelligence, tried to keep them happy to keep you alive. But now you're an adult and you don't need their approval. The reality of being a people pleaser is that you think you're keeping the peace, but really you're just creating this loop of silent resentment, both towards others and yourself. Because at the core, you're going to start resenting yourself for always having to do this or for always feeling like you need to give a certain answer. So while you're attempting to create positive emotions on the surface, you're really creating negative emotions subconsciously underneath the surface. It's a mask. You're wearing this mask parading as this super nice person when underneath you don't feel nice. You feel obligated. And you've convinced yourself that this obligation makes you a nice person. That's not what a nice person is. A nice person is just somebody who thinks of others, who considers others. It doesn't mean you have no boundaries. It just means that when you can and when you're able, and when it's important to you, you do give to others, or you just think of others, you consider others. That's all it is. It doesn't mean that you railroad your own needs. I think the word that I'm looking for is actually steamroll and not railroad. But if you've learned anything from listening to this podcast, it's that I tend to make up phrases and words that aren't actually phrases and words, but I hope you understand my meaning. So rather than railroad your own needs, don't steamroll your own needs. But you get what I'm saying. Don't lower your boundaries. Don't erase your own needs. But the irony here is that if you're a people pleaser, you often end up feeling disrespected by people for asking you to do these things that you feel so obligated to do. You start to feel like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll do that. Yeah, I'll go to this event. Yeah, I'll do that thing. Yeah, I'll be your person. But you feel disrespected. But the irony is that you've taught people to treat you that way. You've taught people that you are that person, that you do want to be asked to do those things because you always say yes. So that feeling of being disrespected and of people not respecting your personal needs is something that you've taught them to do, and it's now your responsibility to undo that, to pull the boundaries back up and say, you know what, I would love to do that, but I'm just not available. I would love to be that person, but unfortunately I just can't do that today. Whatever it is, reframe. It's important to reframe in your mind that having a boundary is not unkind. And you may even need to repeat that to yourself as you are holding the boundary. You know, I know the people pleasers that are close to me, they set the boundary and then they panic. They set the boundary and then they go, was that okay? Is it okay that I said no? Is it okay that I didn't give them the thing that they wanted because I feel bad? And that is the moment. That's your brain feeling uncomfortable with this new habit, this new boundary that you've put in place. And usually I'm the one, as the not people pleaser, to be like, yes, it's okay. It's okay. They don't think any less of you. It's not like you were unkind or rude. You just had a boundary and that's okay. And people will get used to that once you teach them that you don't say yes to everything or that you don't steamroll, your own boundaries. You have to get used to that uncomfortable feeling for a while until it's not uncomfortable anymore, until it becomes easier to say, no, I'm not available. No, I can't do that. Or maybe it's a boundary like, hey, that made me uncomfortable. I don't feel okay when you speak to me that way. I don't feel okay when you, do X, Y, Z. That's not something I'm comfortable with, and I'm going to hold a boundary here. I'm not going to allow you to speak to me that way. I'm not going to allow you to treat me this way or whatever it happens to be. And as you do that, as you start to change those habits and put those boundaries back up, that is also you practicing your own self-worth and practicing your own confidence, because you're standing up for yourself and your own needs. You're saying, no, this is where my boundaries are. This is what's important to me. I'm not being rude to anybody else. I'm just saying this is the line that I don't cross. You're teaching yourself that you matter and your needs matter because you didn't do that as a child, most likely. Maybe you developed people-pleasing habits and you didn't have that sort of childhood. But either way, somewhere along the line, you have convinced yourself that your needs don't matter as much as other people's needs. Every time you override your own needs or your own intuition to make other people happy, you're telling yourself that you don't matter. And now we're undoing that. Every time that you set the boundary, that you hold the boundary, that you say no because it's important to you to say no, you are teaching yourself that, you know what, I do matter. My needs do matter. You're also building self-trust. Self-trust is built by honoring your own boundaries and values and not by adjusting to other people's preferences. So you're learning, you know what? I am this type of person. I can trust myself because I'm a confident person with high self-worth and boundaries. And I'm going to teach the people around me with kindness to know this is where my boundaries are. So, when people think of me, Avery, I'm not a people pleaser. People don't necessarily expect that if they ask me to do something, I'm going to say yes every time. What they do know about me is that I'm always going to be honest and I'm always going to give them the truth, right? I'm always going to say, no, I'm not available for that. Yes, I am available for that. And it causes people to have more respect for you because they know that you're going to be honest with them. You're going to be frank. You're not going to bend your own needs for their needs, because ultimately, whether they understand it consciously or subconsciously, that is going to cause people to see you in a weaker sense. They're going to see you as someone with weaker boundaries. They're not going to have the same amount of respect for you than if you show up as a person who presents as somebody who's confident and has strong boundaries, which has no direct reference to how nice you are, by the way, because that's such a common misconception. Oh, you have strong boundaries? Oh, you're confident? You must not be nice. There is a big difference between niceness or kindness and weakness. And I think as a culture, we often confuse weakness and overcompensating as just kindness. Because I don't know about you, but if somebody does something kind for me, I would much rather somebody do something kind for me because they actually want to, because it actually matters to them and they want to out of the kindness of their heart. I don't want people to say yes to me or be kind to me because they feel obligated. That's not real kindness. That's not someone being nice. That's someone being obligated. If you come and do something for me, I want it to be because you love me, or it matters to you to be kind to me. And so that's how I view it with other people. I think if I do something for someone else, it's because I actually want to. I care about you. I love you. I want to do this thing out of the kindness of my heart, not because I feel obligated. And genuinely think about if we were all doing that, how much more honest and pure kindness would be, because we would all be giving and receiving kindness in its true form, not out of obligation. Okay, so if you are someone that is a people pleaser, what I want you to get from this episode is basically kind of untraining your mind and untraining your body and your nervous system to not become a people pleaser. Starts one with awareness, right? Which I'm assuming by now you have. You're aware of where these people pleasing habits came from or how you got to where you are, what your habits are. And now just having awareness that it's gonna be uncomfortable, but it's going to be so worth it. It is so important for you to value your own needs. And you need to believe that so that you can be okay getting uncomfortable and starting to shift those habits over. So what does that look like? It looks like saying no without over-explaining yourself. No, I'm sorry, I can't make it. No, I'm sorry, I can't do that for you this time. You don't even have to say sorry. You can just say, no, I'm not available. And that's it. You don't have to over-explain. You don't have to overcompensate. Why? Because you're stepping into a sense of self-confidence and self-assuredness. Think to yourself, what would the most confident version of me say? What would the most confident version of me, how would she or he respond to this? And I talked about this in the episode around self-worth, but people with high self-worth are not overly worried about what other people think about them. It's just not that important. It doesn't mean that you're not kind. It doesn't mean you're not a kind person. It means that your self-worth and how you feel about yourself does not rest on what other people think about you. It doesn't matter. What matters is what you think about you. Your own inner values. Are you showing up in a way that you value? What kind of person do you want to show up as? Are you showing up as that person? And how do you feel about that? So people with high self-worth feel confident with their choices because they make choices based on what they believe, and then they feel confident in that, and they don't second guess it based on other people's responses. It doesn't mean that you might never have a weak moment or you might never feel bad or second guess something. It's not about perfection. It's just about, in general, showing up as a very confident person who's confident in their choices. You teach people how to treat you every time you confidently say no. Every time you confidently show up and don't overcompensate, you are demonstrating where your boundaries lie. And those no's, in response, make your yeses more confident and more sure. It goes back to the thing about kindness. Do you want kindness from somebody who genuinely means it, or do you want kindness from somebody who's overcompensating? When you say no, and people know that where your boundaries are and that you're not somebody that overcompensates or somebody that says yes to everything, all of a sudden your yeses matter more because now your yeses actually have more meaning behind them because you actually want to do the thing. You actually feel confident. You come to the table with a lot more energy behind your yes because you mean it and it's not breaking a boundary. And people will respect that. People respond differently when you are people respond differently when you are someone who shows up as a decisive person versus showing up as a wishy-washy person. People can tell too whenever you say yes and maybe you don't want to say yes. Again, some people are okay with kind of overstepping boundaries and they're like, well, I could tell they didn't really want to, but they said yes, so I'm going to go with that. You know what I mean? There's a lot of people that don't mind overstepping your boundaries, or they don't mind the fact that they know that you were uncomfortable saying yes. They're just trying to get their needs met because guess what? They are confident in their decisions. They're confident in their boundaries and they're not so worried about your feelings. You have to be worried about your feelings. You have to be worried about your boundaries and your emotions. And you know what? That brings up an important point of considering what your healthy relationships look like. If you struggle with people pleasing, it's important to consider the relationship that you are compromising your boundaries for. What does this person mean to you? Is this person important to you? Or is this just a work colleague that you're always bending over backwards for, but you don't even necessarily have a close relationship with this person? It's just that you feel obligated because you think it's you being a nice person. You know what I mean? Healthy relationships will not second guess your boundaries. And unhealthy relationships are not people that you should be compromising your boundaries for. Okay? You also shouldn't be compromising your boundaries for people that aren't even on your inner circle or that you care that much about. Is this a spouse or a child or a parent? And you shouldn't always compromise your boundaries for those people either. Especially not for these outer relationships that you're barely even tied to, which often people pleasers find themselves in these situations where they're compromising boundaries for people that don't even matter that much to them. Healthy relationships are built on mutual respect, not self-sacrifice. So, especially when we're considering our inner circle, the people that actually matter to us, the people we're showing up for day in and day out, right? Our inner circle people. If anything, it's more important for those people to know where your boundaries are because those are the people you're dealing with the most often. Those are the relationships that bring out the most emotional responses in you and that you probably love the most. Those are also probably the people that you have gotten used to lowering your boundaries for. And so they expect you now to lower your boundaries, whether it's your parents or a sibling or a spouse, a child. Like they're used to you not having boundaries. So it's the hardest people to kind of change the expectation around where your boundaries are, but it's also the most important. People who get upset with you having boundaries reveal that those were the people that were actually benefiting from your lack of boundaries. And so they might get mad at you for having boundaries, but in reality, it's because you bending over backwards and erasing your own needs, that was serving them. And they are likely either not emotionally mature enough, not emotionally aware enough, or whatever it is. They don't recognize, or maybe they do recognize and they don't really care, right? That you were in an uneven relationship where they are kind of siphoning from you, where you are losing out. You are on the losing end of this relationship because your boundaries, they were getting something from you when your boundaries were lowered and you were losing something. So this is not an equal give and take, and it's not a healthy relationship. Boundaries are your energetic filter for quality relationships. A healthy relationship has boundaries on both sides, and both people are respecting the boundaries of the other person. Anytime you have one person who is steamrolling the boundaries of another person, or one person has lowered their boundaries and the other person is benefiting from that, whether they are aware of it or not, that is a not healthy relationship. But the only person who can define where your boundaries are and put them up are you. You have to be responsible for your own boundaries. You cannot just expect people to respect your boundaries if you have not made it clear where they are. So clear communication, clear wording about where your boundaries are, clear action, the actions that you take, do those demonstrate where your boundaries are? Are you saying one thing but then doing something different? Because that's going to confuse people. It's up to you to clearly communicate to people where your boundaries are. And as you do that, you will become a person with higher self-worth. You will become a person with higher self-trust. You will become a more confident person. But confidence doesn't come from being liked. It comes from being sure of who you are and where you stand and refusing to compromise on that. And I promise you, you are better off being a respected person who is also kind than a kind person who is hoarding resentment underneath the surface. The more that you trust yourself and have your own back, the less you will need to seek the validation from other people, and the more you will have that experience of getting to validate yourself and feeling confident in your own choices. Other people's disappointment is not your responsibility. Okay, I'm going to say that again because it's really important. And that's what I want you to leave this episode with. Other people's disappointment is not your responsibility. It is not your job to make other people happy all the time. And that is what you may have learned as a child, and you have to unlearn that now because you will do it subconsciously. It's not your job to keep other people happy. You can be a kind person that holds your boundaries and you don't feel bad about saying no. It does not make you a mean person to say no and to hold boundaries. That's not what kindness is. That's not what niceness is. I should do a whole episode on what kindness even is. Okay, but we've got to rewire that belief that kindness is just giving people what they want all the time and making other people happy constantly. So if you are a people pleaser, I want to give you homework for this episode, and I want you to take this week and practice saying no to something that you might normally say yes to that you don't want to say yes to. Or maybe it doesn't happen this week, but maybe it happens next week, or maybe you know that there's a habit or a person who consistently asks you to overstep your own boundaries. I just want you to think about what that might be for you, and I want you to practice rewiring your brain to what kindness is, that you're not responsible for other people's happiness or other people's disappointments, and that it's okay. Not only is it okay, it's absolutely vital to say no. Let me put it this way. If it's not a hell yes, it's a no, right? If it's not an absolutely your responsibility, or it's not a heck yes, or it's not a, you know what, yeah, this means a lot to me, I'm going to do this, then it's a no. Then it's a no. And it doesn't matter how the other person responds because that is not your responsibility. That is their responsibility. Okay, so I believe in you, people pleasers. I really hope that this episode was helpful for you and that it encourages you. I know it's uncomfortable and I know it's hard to change those mindsets and those beliefs, but I believe in you and you can do it, and you are a kind person no matter what. If this episode resonated with you at all, please leave the podcast a review. It would really mean a lot to me. I really take those reviews seriously, and I would love to hear from you. You can always email me at daremetопроsper@gmail.com. If you have any guest requests or branding requests, I'd love to work with you. I'd love to hear from you. And until then, I will see you next time on Dare Me to Prosper.